Hello and welcome to Turn Zero Loss, hosted by the Magic Engineers. My name's David. With me today is Sherry and Eli, as per the usual. And today we've got a topic that will likely rankle some feathers and rankle your rankles. Stax. Stax here is one of the most controversial EDH playstyles that has existed since the format's inception. And both Sherry and Eli have very strong opinions on Stax. I myself have an opinion on Stax, but I don't feel it's strong enough to really merit a part in this debate. So Sherry and Eli here are going to be arguing vehemently about the merits and dismerits of Stax. For the pro, we have Sherry.
Hello. What an intro. What an intro.
Hello. I love it. And for the against, we have Eli.
Yeah, no, stacks are bad.
Wow, he's starting off hot. So why don't we get started off here and describe what it is about Stax you like or dislike. We'll start with Sherry.
You see, my favorite part about Stax, it offers the opposite of solitaire playing. It prevents solitaire. It allows for everyone to play the same amount of spells, getting the most use out of their one spell a game or one spell a turn, whatever you may prefer. Also, this is a controversial thing. I think Magic needs it just because they need a archetype to hate. Because otherwise, the solitaire playing that you like doing so much, Eli, would be probably the next most hated one.
Okay. I mean, solitaire play usually has a way to end the game. Stax should have a way to end the game too, usually. It just takes much longer than it should. In my opinion, at least. That's the thing that I argue against Stax the most, is that it extends the length of any game, depending on how much Stax's on the table. Sometimes people play Stax without the intent of being able to win the game, which is a completely wrong way to do it. To be clear, I don't say that you shouldn't play Stax. I just don't like playing against Stax. So, like, if you're going to play it, know that every piece that is a Stax piece is going to be a target for my removal. That's really all it is.
You see what I think Stax, when used by the proper player, and a lot of people don't play it right, you have to have a game plan of how you're setting up your board, how you're setting up your pieces, so that you can create basically overwhelming, like, incremental advantage that doesn't take 20 turns. And the best players who play Stax don't take 20 turns to win.
And Stax is not a really prevalent problem for higher level formats. So things like CDH and just high level EDH, you're going to find those players that can find the win in less than 10 turns. But if you're in just a casual pod and you're just a casual player that doesn't know what they're doing, and you just kind of are playing Stax pieces out, there's no way for the person to find a way to win the game. It's just stopping everyone else from winning the game in turn.
Yeah, I guess that brings us to the next question that I'm going to direct to Sherry is, do you feel the hatred for Stax is more due to mismanagement of player expectations than it is the actual construction of the deck?
Yes, I think most of the time, like, I'll take an example, one of my prized decks, my Winota deck. I am always honest with it when I'm about to play. I'm like, hey, this deck is not nice. It's got Stax pieces in it, but it doesn't have, like, Winter Orb or the other one. It has all the creature and hate bears in it. When I get to play it, even with people I don't know, I'm honest with it. And usually the other people will play a not similar Stax deck, but they will play a deck that can work within that restriction that I am putting out there. Like, when they, for example, like, I'm just like thinking of, like, Imposing Sovereign, or what's the big one? It's Grand Arbiter. Not Grand Arbiter. It's a white creature, prevents people from just playing spells or doing things on your turn.
Dread Magistrate?
No, that's you're thinking the right creature, I think. And I think it is Grand Arbiter.
Yeah. Anyways, so I manage expectations when I'm going into into a game. I don't ever like with new people, I will not bring it out because number one, it doesn't allow them to play the game. And besides, with new people, the game takes longer anyway. So I'm honest with it. And I think most Stax people who play it, because usually it's not found as much in the lower power levels, are honest with it. But people still find a way to get mad anyway because they're restricting the one spell per turn or whatever. And that's also, I think, a problem with people's opposing deck construction because they don't have the solutions. They don't have enchantment destruction, creature destruction, board wipes, exile effects to get rid of my pieces. Even though that most of them...
It was Grand Abolisher.
Grand Abolisher. They don't have the pieces to remove it. Whereas like when I'm competing against Eli or David here, they know when I say I'm going to play this, they know that you should have creature removal and probably board wipes because my Winota deck, it snowballs. It's the name of the deck. So I think it's about managing expectations. And they usually build a deck or have a deck that has the appropriate removal.
I guess that brings me to my next question. This one I'm directed towards Eli. So do you feel that the problem, do you think that if someone were just playing a creature-only Stax, would you be more okay with it as opposed to all the other Stax effects that exist in Magic with enchantments and artifacts that are considerably harder for most colors to remove?
I think honestly, like out of all the Stax decks that I've played against, because I've played against a handful of them now at this point, I think Sherry's is definitely probably the most fair because it is all creature stacks. There's not really any enchantment stacks. There's not really any artifact stacks. So like a creature only stacks where it's all hate bears or it's, something a little bit beyond a hate bear. Cause obviously it has to be a 2/2 for 2, but anything beyond that is fine too, as long as it's still a creature. Like it makes it easier for anybody else to keep up with because obviously most decks, well, at least back in a few months ago, I don't know if it still happens nowadays. Haven't played Magic in a while, but most decks usually run at least one board wipe. And with that, they're able to at least hope they can draw into it with their one card they can draw per turn.
Okay. So with that in mind, I'm going to direct this to both of you now. So in your mindset, and from what it sounds like to me, it seems like tutors are probably the best card to play against the Stax deck because it lets you find whatever answer you need to eliminate the Stax pieces that you need. So my question goes to does playing Stax inherently lead to the presence of more tutors in a deck?
If you're playing it regularly, yes. Which tutors do create a faster game state, which also it kind of actually that creates a better environment for Stax because it allows people to not feel as unfairly unprepared for it. Because if they're tutoring and they have a bunch of tutors in their deck to toolbox out what they need or toolbox their removal, it'll allow them to combat let's say I play a Winter Orb or a Stasis. I don't have any of both. I do have a Winter Orb, but I don't play it. But like for example, a Stasis.
Yet.
Yes, I have a Stasis. But for example, I think just allowing it and being honest with it just allows the environment to become a lot more even and people are prepared for it. And that makes it a lot more interesting from both the stack side and from the non-stack side because you're like, when you destroy a Winter Orb or a Stasis, you feel good. In fact, you've won favor amongst the entire table. Right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
And that leads to an advantageous situation where you are better off just because you had, let's say, a 1 or 2 tutors in your deck that allowed you to destroy your Stasis or a Stasis. And it won you favor on the political side, so you may be able to make some deals or you might be able to kind of save your skin and win the game.
Now, obviously, there are ways that they're able to counter tutors in Stax as well, though. So there's obviously things that even Mind Sensor will stop somebody from searching all their library. Other things like, oh gosh, what was it? It's like a new. It's that one that whenever an opponent searches their library, you could draw a card.
Oh,
I don't
the
remember the name of
archaeologist
it.
one, I think. Or
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
opposition agent. Are you
no,
thinking of?
no,
Or
it's
No,
from
no. It's a white card
it's from
from
Baldur's Gate.
Baldur's
Yeah.
Gate.
oh, okay. I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting card. So you basically, whenever your opponent searches their library, you gain a life, and then you draw a card. It's an interesting card. But there's stuff like that that punishes people for running tutors as well. So it's kind of a balance where you don't want to run too many tutors because you could also just be punished for it. And then you just have a bunch of dead draws.
I'm on the side of tutors exist to make to make your deck easier to filter through. Because let's say you don't have the answer to the Stax piece, but you have an answer to win the game, and tutors are the way to do it. So if you have one,
Yeah.
it's still a benefit to you, regardless of whether or not you actually have the piece to remove it.
And obviously, like, where I stand on tutors is pretty obvious. Like, I run them in nearly every deck I have. So that's kind of a moot point.
Okay. All right. That will bring me to my next question then. This one I think will provoke probably the strongest reaction for all of you. So get ready for the controversy. Do you think Stax decks are appropriate for a local game store setting?
Absolutely not.
It depends. Where I previously lived, it was almost encouraged. But because the power level at some of the tables I was at was at top optimization, and in my experience, when I brought my Monota deck, they were like, "Oh, go ahead, we don't care, just do it," because they knew it's my way of keeping up, because I don't have all of the pieces that they have. Like, I played against it was like Riel or something like that. That had a Bazaar of Baghdad, all OG dual lands.
Oh,
That deck was a menace. But like, I was able to keep up at least for the most part until they comboed off. And I kept them from comboing off for a while. And it's sort of, if you're at that high level when you're in a giant game store, I think it's fine. But once you get to the smaller environments, you shouldn't be bringing it unless you know the people you were playing with.
yeah. I think that's the biggest key is if you're coming into a new local game store, you should not bring a Stax decks with you. Or if you do have it, don't pull it out until you see what other people are playing. Because if you are brand new to a store and you bring out a Stax deck, you are setting a precedent that nobody will want to play with you except for all the other degenerate players in that store. And sometimes when you go to a local game store, you don't want to play against degenerate players. Like, in my personal experience, I was at a local game store down where I lived before I moved, and this guy was literally known as the menace of the store. And I was like, oh, there's no way it's that bad. And it was. He literally walked up, pulls out the Stax deck, and within 2 turns, I couldn't play a single card a game. Like, every single round, I was just like, okay, draw a card, pass turn, I can't play anything.
Does that explain your name of turn
And
one
that's just,
Draneth in the knowledge pool?
yes. It made it to where I couldn't play and only he could play, and it was no fun for anyone. We were all just like, okay, well, I can play a land.
Well, that's
Great.
It's sort of like the self-awareness of playing with Stacks. Doing that really doesn't provide you an advantage. It just means you win the game, but you don't know when you're winning the game. Stacks pieces should be used when they are, like, when you are in a position where you need to start locking down on resources, because you see you winning within the next, like, let's say 2 or 3 turns, versus like doing a turn 1. What does that give you? It just means eventually you're going to draw. It doesn't even credit you for like good deck building.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, I guess I get to wait until I lose. At that point, it's like it's a war of attrition. So it's like I have a land that could deal enough damage to kill the Draneth, but I can only draw 1 card per turn, and the card gets exiled. So what do I even do? What's the point?
All right. Good thing you bring that up, Sherry, because I have another question on that same vein. So whenever people see Stax decks, they usually associate a set amount of cards with them. They associate stuff like Stasis, they associate stuff like Winter Orb, they associate stuff like Driveth Magistrate. And I feel as though that gives the impression that Stax deck building is less skillful and less based on actual ability than other deck archetypes. Would you guys say this is true?
I would say there is a not a hair of truth. That is like I would say like a half true statement. The issue is that Wizards is I think Drannith Magistrate is probably the last we'll see of a real Stax piece in terms because I don't think they're going to make a card similar to that, at least in a standard legal, because they've been outright they don't like printing it for some reason because it doesn't sell. It makes it not sell well because people have this association with the card that doesn't let you do anything being not able to play your cards. So they avoid that in the standard environment.
Yeah.
So we only will likely see it in like a Modern Horizons 3 or a modern legal set. Like, but you understand what I mean. But to that effect, it's also a good Stax deck has several ways to win because you have to be optimized to that, well, let's say one spell per turn if you play like a Rule of Law, or I can't remember the other one. It's not Silence, but it's the one that's like it. But I think that's the important thing is that like if you have a good deck that's built to win outside of your Stax pieces, that's the best deck to have.
Yeah, I think that's really the skill of it, honestly. Like I can appreciate the skill it takes to build a decent Stax deck because it's not brainless like most CDH blue decks. It's like in a CDH blue deck, they are literally going to throw in every counter spell they could possibly run that's like half decent. They're going to run any spells that are going to basically let them tutor for their piece that they need to win the game, mostly Thassa's Oracle, and that's really it. In a Stax deck, they have to have a plan to bring the game to a conclusion, and that conclusion isn't always the same in every deck. And there is a little bit of thought and skill that goes into that. Now, the pieces that actually add up to the stacks, that's kind of mindless, yes, but there are pieces that are excluded most of the time with the thought of, well, if this card needs to win me the game, so I can't have this Stax piece in there. Otherwise, if I play it, then I'm screwing myself
Yeah,
over.
it's like having a Containment Priest in a Winota deck. I made that mistake for one game, and I'm like, oh, this actually just screws me. But it's like knowing your cards and also understanding that your deck, like I'm going to use your not turn one Drannith in a Knowledge Pool. If you have a Drannith Magistrate and you play Knowledge Pool, you better win like 1 or 2 turns away because you've just locked out the rest of the game. But you also have to be mindful that, like, for example, if you were for some reason a Stax deck that played blue-black, you have to know that you can't do a Thassa's Oracle in it. Because you are usually limited by either your land resources or your Rule of Law type effects, limiting your ability to play a number of spells a turn.
All right. That will bring me to the final question that I have for you guys regarding Stax. If you were to build a Stax deck, what commander would you build it with?
Honestly, I have designed a deck for Stax at one point, and it was definitely a degenerate one. That's for sure. It was Urza Lord High Otter for
You're a
some reason.
monster.
Of course it was.
Because, like I said, if you're going to build a deck and you're going to be degenerate, you might as well full send into that degeneracy.
If I were to build one, a real, like not, I wouldn't say not a real one, but if I were to build one that isn't Winota, I would be a Derevi Stax player.
I see.
Derevi Stax is awful, but I can appreciate that.
Well, like that's the thing, right? Some of these commanders, like Grand Arbiter Augustine, Derevi, even if like a Lavinia, like those are just, you know what you're getting into. Or even Meryl. It's like that's also a hate bear too. It's like it is fairly obvious what you're going to do, or if you're really tasty, like a Hikori Dust Drinker, or a Gaddock Teague, or hell, even Send Triplets.
Gee, I don't want to imagine a Send Triplets Stax deck. That scares me. I don't understand.
But like there's like
Terrible.
there's like a modicum of honesty. It's not like you're like secret Zers where you find out that it's like until like halfway through the game when you've let him get so much advantage. Like, oh yep, and there it is. There's the winner orb, and we can't win.
Yeah, it's also not like the 9 billion secret Nekuzar decks
Oh yeah,
that exist out there.
I mean, Nekuzar usually encourages card draw, so it's not really. They don't really run stacks per se.
Right, I'm just using this as an instance
Yeah.
of being a secret. Okay, so what have we learned today, boys?
It's inconclusive as whether or not
I would say
stacks
it's
are bad.
definitive. Stacks are good. Stacks are good when done right. That's.
Well, I mean,
What was that?
as the moderator, I'm not allowed to have an opinion on it. So, yeah.
I would like to hear your opinion on it at the very least, because you're being so middle of the ground. Why do you gotta be so neutral?
And it's a beige alert. That's why. So I am in favor of Stax existing as an archetype. I don't think they get the support they need from Wizards to make them a more interesting style of play. You can't do it with all the colors in the game, and that kind of bothers me because, like, I'm not saying like the traditional stacks of like limiting card draw, limiting amount of play per turn, that shouldn't exist in something like green, but I think there's other ways you can do it. Like you can limit it to, target opponent can only have one creature on the board at a time, or they can only have one artifact on the board at a time. Like
Terrible.
it sounds awful, but like you can make those cards like 6 or 7 cost without any real worry about them being super unbalanced. Like I just think that there's other ways to do stacks, and Wizards has not committed to them, and as such, they're kind of one note for me. But I do appreciate the archetype, and I do appreciate the playstyle.
Yeah,
I just wish there were more
I'm
options.
looking at all the Stacks commanders, the typical, and I think every single one of them, besides one, and that one's kind of an oddball, has white in it. And I like white as a color. I think it's a very interesting. I do like it being kind of like the Staxy color, but the fact that there's only like a couple like black commanders or have like black in their color identity, that you really don't, because black has some actually really interesting Stax type pieces that are not like stereotypical, that are more like your contamination and like kind of resource denial type of things, but they don't necessarily restrict you, which I think is an interesting space that I wish Wizards would explore more. And again, green is very uncommon as well too. So, and the problem is they're not going to do it anytime soon, at least not that I foresee.
Yeah. All right, boys. Well, I think that will wrap this episode up pretty nicely on a bow. And we've learned today that Stax is great. People need to be more responsible with it.
With some power comes some responsibility.
Yep. Even in Magic.
And
So,
if Magic is in fact still dead.
yeah, Magic is still in fact dead. So, well, thank y'all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this particular episode. Feel free to give us a like, comment, subscribe, the usual stuff. Hit us up on Twitter/X/Twitter and at Turn Zero Loss. And yeah, stay tuned.
Stacks is love. Stacks
Have a
is
good one.
Bye-bye.
Love Stax. Love Stax.